Well, good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us today. As you heard, the work done by MMB and the good work that they do gave us a true picture of where Minnesota truly is right now when it comes to our budget. I'd like to remind the room that just in 2 years ago, we had an $18 billion surplus and then hit family budgets even harder with raising taxes and fees by another $10 billion to fund the spending spree that we saw happen here in the state of Minnesota under one-party Democrat control in just 2 short years. In the November forecast, we knew that we were looking at a $5.1 billion deficit. And as you can see today, that has gotten even worse. We are now looking at a $6 billion deficit. Democrats in the state, as you have heard, want to go ahead and blame anyone else for the damage that has happened to our state budget. But this was an irresponsible spending spree. And now we have to figure that out. But before Democrats actually spent it all and raised taxes and fees, we actually had the money in the bank to handle any potential shortages in any area, any uptick in costs, but that was all spent. We had been warning over 2 years that this was not going to be sustainable, that we couldn't have excess spending and raising of taxes and fees in this way, or we would be headed for a deficit. Under one-party Democrat control, our voices and our votes were not needed, and that is why we are here right now today. While our revenue grows in the state of Minnesota, our spending has gone even faster. But looking forward, knowing that we have a deadline of May 19th to pass a state budget, that will be a bipartisan budget. And we know that. My expectation is that Democrats are going to meet with us. They're going to meet together, and we will come to the table with both tax-saving cuts and absolutely no tax increases. We've got to come together to fix the mess that we find ourselves in today. You might ask, well, what things are you going to cut? Our chairs of every committee had reached out to the agencies in December, asking for ways to find cost savings within their agencies, to review those areas so that we could start that work early in December, knowing that we were going to have to find some savings. We're still trying to wait, or we are still actually waiting for that information. Some have given it to us, some we look forward to those continued conversations. But Republicans are ready to work on a responsible and balanced budget that's going to fund our priorities. It will protect vulnerable Minnesotans, yet we are going to address the fiscal disaster that Democrats in the state of Minnesota have created. We can't take time blaming a new administration for problems that were caused over the last 2 years under one-party Democrat control. We have to work together. I have requested standing meetings with our governor 2 months ago. I'm still waiting for those to happen. But I look forward to working with my Democrat colleagues both in the House, in the Senate, and then with our governor as we go forward. With that, I would like you to hear from Majority Leader Niska.
Thank you, Speaker Demuth. And you know, it's been interesting to hear the way the Democrats have tried to distract and deflect from their failed record, and they want to talk about everything else other than what's happening in our Minnesota budget, in our Minnesota policy, in our Minnesota as a result of Minnesota policies. But the reality is, and what we see in the budget forecast, is that our fiscal house is out of order at the state level, and it's out of order because our state economy is fundamentally out of balance. It's very clear when you look at the long-term budget forecast that our government is too big and it's growing bigger, and our private economy is being stifled by the massive increases in government spending, government taxes, and government regulation. If you just look at slide 18, it shows, contrary to the Democrats' claims of responsible budgeting, that in fact the structural imbalance, not looking at the carry forwards, not looking at where we are at our current cash position, the structural imbalance The money going out compared to the money coming in is bad, it's out of balance, and it's getting worse. It's actually doubling every budget cycle shown on that. It's $3 billion and then $6 billion. If you use inflation, it's $2 billion and then $4 billion if you're not counting inflation. Our budget problem is not because of including inflation in our budget projections. It's not because of anything happening outside of the state of Minnesota. It's happening because our budget, our government policies and our fiscal policies are putting a fundamental imbalance between the size of government and the size of the rest of the economy. And that's what Republicans are focused on, making sure that we do responsible budgeting, that we find savings where we can, but that we find ways to unleash the private economy so that we can pay for all of the government services that all of us expect to happen. So I'll now turn it over to our Senate Leader, Mark Johnson.
Well, thank you, Leader Niska and Speaker Demuth. Appreciate it, and thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I'm Senate Republican Leader Mark Johnson, and I just am proud to have the opportunity to really set the record straight. Look, we've received 2 forecasts this week. The first one left a little bit of mess out on our roads, but the second one is going to leave a mess of our economy going forward. And so Democrats have clearly broken Minnesota's budget. The deficit that they are leaving behind is going to be a mess that we are going to have to be cleaning up this session, and we're going to be working hard for that. Their ridiculous spending of over $18 billion of our surplus over the last 2 years, the $10 billion of taxes that they've raised on our businesses and our families and our communities are really hampering the growth of this economy. Minnesotans sent a clear message, didn't they? Democrats' out of control spending has to stop. We got to put Minnesota budget first. Minnesota Democrats are constantly blaming DC, but there is no one to blame but themselves. They squandered the surplus, they raised taxes, they wasted $500 million in fraud. The reality is, Walz's administration has grown spending to unsustainable levels. Minnesotans haven't experienced similar growth in their personal budgets and cannot afford to be treated as bottomless piggy banks right now. Simply put, Democrats have put us in an unsustainable spending path, and that will hurt every Minnesotan. We need to put the budget first of Minnesotans, protecting their income, funding their priorities, and stopping the fraud and reducing government growth. With that, we're open for questions.
Letter to congressional leaders warning of those cuts potentially to Medicaid. Is that a feeling that you're not willing to vocalize? Are you worried about what may happen but don't want the backlash from the president?
What's fun, and thank you for that question. So it's about the letter that some Republicans have signed on to over the last couple of weeks here. I think what we were looking at there is, as this process is going in Washington, D.C., what is great to see is that it's no longer the status quo in D.C., and we're actually asking those tough questions of how we're going to be funding priorities, not just in Minnesota, but across the country. And so this was an opportunity to have that open dialogue, which for so long has been really a third rail, and we haven't been able to discuss. So now just being able to explore the possibilities is really refreshing. I think a lot of Minnesotans and across the country should be excited about what is happening, and everybody can have their input into that.
The uncertainty, though, it creates potentially the federal freeze, cuts, layoffs are not in this forecast. And we saw the chart, a third of the state budget is federal money. It's a top 10 employer, or was a top 10 employer in the state. The impact could be real.
Yeah, and Mary, I think one of the interesting things, too, is you hear the Democrats continually talk about the 42 changes in tariffs that have gone back and forth and the uncertainty there. What's great is to see that we're opening up those negotiations. Tariffs are being used as a tool to open up negotiations so Minnesotans, manufacturers, their trade goods, their commodities, we will try to get better deals for those across the globe. And so, yes, they throw out the boogeyman of Trump and all that stuff, but the reality is this is a new day in America, an opportunity for Minnesota to be a stronger state. And quite frankly, we're excited about what's going to be happening in many ways, an opportunity to grow this economy.
Address that as well, the loss of federal funds, a third of the budget, what that could potentially do, since that's not
The
enough.
important thing that we recognize right now is where we find ourselves regardless of what we saw today, $6 billion deficit. This is time to rein in spending in the state of Minnesota. As far as the things that are actually being talked about potentially through the media and coming out of Washington, D.C., we don't know if that is going to happen or to what extent. We can look at that and have that information, but we have to focus on what we are doing here in the state of Minnesota. Absolutely. We have 6,000 new FTEs that were created in the state of Minnesota just over the last 2 years. We have $1 billion that has gone to nonprofits. Now, nonprofits in the state of Minnesota do a great job, some of them, but yet we know that there's a number of unaccountable nonprofits. We have over $600 million in known fraud in the state of Minnesota that until Republicans started, and we have the one-seat advantage right now, and we have a fraud prevention committee, that fraud has gone unanswered for. We have millions of dollars going out in empty trains. That is what we have to take a look at in the state of Minnesota first, before we even consider what could be a potential federal change to our income. We have wasteful money, wasteful spending, fraud, and an excess and bloat of government that we do not need in the state of Minnesota. That's what we have to come to terms with and work on. Other questions?
How about the rainy day fund? The Democrats categorize that as something that would not be used to plug a sudden shortfall or dramatic shortfall in Medicaid.
Before we would even look at a rainy day spending, we have to get our actual spending, or using that reserve, we have to get our actual spending under control. That has not taken place over the last 2 years, and we know that. We have to balance this budget, and we can do it without dipping into that at this point. We can get our work done on time. May 19th is when we have to have that work done, even with a 4-week delay because Democrats did not show up for work in the House of Representatives. That will not be an excuse of why we can't get the work done on time for Minnesotans with a balanced budget and a reduction in the spending so that we can go forward and have a strong state in that we need. Other questions?
Do you agree with Democrats that there's a significant chance of a recession here, which would throw the state into a worse budget situation than what you say the Democrats have put us in?
We know right now the position that the Democrats in the state of Minnesota have pushed us in is unsustainable. That's what we're going to focus on first. Regardless of what happens at a federal or a national level, we will continue to consider those things. But right now, we have to rein in the spending that we saw with out-of-control Democrats spending taxpayer money. Other questions?
Do you expect across-the-board cuts or a more targeted percentage, one agency versus another, or just 5-10% across the board? Have you gotten that far yet?
I'm going to let our Ways and Means Chair, Chair Torkelson, address how we might look at potential cuts.
Well, thank you for that question. Paul Torkelson, Chair of the Ways and Means Committee in the House. We have been examining the state budget carefully in every budget area. We have no intention of doing straight across the board cuts. We intend to do the work to find first unspent funds that we can claw back, identify where fraud has happened, and cut state agencies where we can. You might remember that when they created the Children and Families Administrative Department, they took parts of other agencies to build it, but they didn't reduce those agencies at all in far as their complement of employees. State government has grown dramatically in this last biennium, and we intend to draw that back down. It's time to make Minnesota government the right size.
75% of the budget is E12 and HHS. Aren't you kind of stuck in those two areas?
Well, we have work to do, and it's not going to be easy. I'm challenging the leaders on both sides of the building to come to joint targets sooner rather than later. We've already wasted a lot of time this session. The first act of the session had no Democrats on the stage, as you might remember, and we're waiting now for the results of a special election. But we have a lot of work to do in a short time. The sooner we can agree to joint targets, the better we can do that work. And so I'm challenging the leaders of the Democrats, both in the Senate and the House, to come to joint targets quickly rather than spending a lot of time trading barbs with each other when we need to get the work done.
Just having conference committees on all all of the issues?
Well, if we end up tied, and we don't know that for a fact yet, yes, I think committees are going to act differently than they ever have before. We've never worked with tied co-chairs and with tied number of members on committees. And yes, I do agree with you that it'll be more like a conference committee work, but we don't know that because we haven't done it yet. And the challenge lies ahead of us. All the more reason to get to these joint targets quickly.
Speaker David, a question for you. Your response to Governor Walz blaming a lot of this on the insanity of President Trump and the majority leader in the Senate saying they've got to pull their heads out of their asses. Your response to that type of language and approach, how helpful or unhelpful is that going to be?
The language and approach that we heard today, and we hear from our Democrat colleagues on a number of occasions, is disrespectful. This is not the time for disrespect in the state of Minnesota. We have to work together all along the campaign trail, and leading up to this point, I had talked about balanced government. We don't have to agree on everything, but we do have the opportunity to work together in a respectful way, and that is what I expect both from the Republicans that I work with and from the Democrats. That's where we need to start the work ahead.
If I could just add on to that too. And we saw last week the Senate Republicans, really we had a press conference on that after the governor called Republican leaders and Republicans across the country Nazis and fascists. Now we see them up here using crass language. Really, I think their narrative is, hey, let's distract you. It's almost like Chicken Little right now, running around saying the sky is falling. But when it comes to state issues, they become ostriches and put their head in the sand. And so when the majority leaders up here is saying that Republicans need to look around and see what's going on, reality is they're just trying to distract Minnesotans from the real problems, and we want to try to get that done, but they're wrecking relationships over and over again. It's hard to get together when they're calling you names like that.
Speaker, one quick follow-up. You have not been able to pass one bill with 68 votes, a consequential bill anyway. How difficult is it going to be, if you go back to a tie, to get to 68 votes on anything budget-related?
We have passed just a couple of bills on a bipartisan basis off the House floor. We have a number of bills up today. There could be some passage of some of those bills. But I think the important thing to recognize is the work that we do together. The message that I'd like to have each one of you take out of this room today is that under full one-party Democrat control, $18 billion of surplus was spent. Taxes and fees on all of us in the state of Minnesota was raised by another $10 billion. We now know that there is a $6 billion deficit, yet we need to function as a legislature and as the government, deliver to the people of Minnesota those core priorities and the things that they need. Our kids need to be able to read at grade level. We need safe communities. We have to reduce our taxes so Minnesotans can afford their lives, and we need an environment that we can all grow in where our businesses, our schools, our hospitals can succeed. That is the takeaway, regardless of the disrespectful language or the deflection to Washington, D.C. We, as House Republicans and my Republican colleagues in the Senate, are focused on the work at hand. We have just a few short months to accomplish that. That is what we are planning to do.
The governor was asked if he was going to speak out nationally, travel, oppose the president. He said, I'll go where I need to go. But he's also saying he's planning to run for a third term as governor. How does his national profile affect the state here?
I believe that what you saw over the last time that the governor ran for national office really shined a light on his actual record and the things that were happening here in Minnesota. I talked to a number of Minnesotans across the state that had no idea the amount of money that was spent over the last 2 years. They had no idea about some of the social issues. It really did shine a light on Minnesota and let people know we have a lot of work to do. I would hope that our governor would prioritize his work here in Minnesota as governor of our state, work with legislative leaders, actually respond if I've asked for some type of a standing meeting to build that relationship as we work toward that balanced budget. I would hope that his first priority would be the state of Minnesota right now, and that is my expectation. Any other questions? Peter.
Okay. You keep saying you don't want to deflect to Washington, it's a process, but when it comes down to it, if there are cuts that are coming down
that will have a big impact on the state budget and some of the programs and put the state in a deeper hole, will you lobby your Republican colleagues in Congress against those?
What we will do is, if those do become a reality, we will have clear communication with our congressional delegation.
Both of you were just in D.C. as guests of Congress people. Did you convey any concerns about Medicaid cuts, or were you?
Right now, the things that are being proposed in Washington are hypothetical because they're not actually happened right now. They have not taken place yet. Those are all things that they're working in Washington. My main focus right now is trying to get this balanced budget here in the state of Minnesota, building working relationships. We have a special election on Tuesday that will determine what the House of Representatives looks like going forward. We will either be in a true majority if Paul Wickstrom wins, or we will be return to a tie in which we already have an organizational agreement that would support that. Our work is focused here in Minnesota, taking into consideration if there are changes at a federal level that impact us, and then we will work through that.
And if I could jump onto that. So Rochelle, your question was simply, what's happening up in DC, how that's going to impact our budgeting then in just, right? That's.
You two were both just there as guests of Congress people.
So we had a great
any...
conversation there. But I think what you want to do here is look at the slides that were up. We're sitting at a structural deficit of $3.1 or $3.2 billion here in the state of Minnesota because of Democrats spending. Yep. And so we've got to be focusing on that. I know that the governor, he's more interested in campaigning right now on a national level. But the reality is we have to be looking at the numbers here in the state. And when you have a $3.2 billion deficit, let's address these problems first before we start getting into the hypotheticals of what's going on in DC. I really think you did a good job at distracting a lot of folks out here, because this is the topic that keeps coming up. What about this over there? But the reality is we have issues right here in the state right now. That's our jobs. We're going to be working on that and focusing on that. And we've got an elected delegation out in DC that we've had great conversations with. Their reconciliation process is going to be continuing and ongoing. And we'll see what happens there, but voice your concerns with those folks.
One more from Dana. This morning you mentioned that paid family and medical leave potential changes could be a space to get some money back. Is that still on the table, and what are you looking at?
We definitely have to look at the way that paid family medical leave is structured right now. What we have heard from businesses, from school districts, from hospitals, that this is not going to be sustainable. We have a program that hasn't even started, and it's already had to have additional money infused. The tax has been raised on every employer, which then can be passed on to the employees. And there's no minimum. If you have one employee, you're on the hook for this program that is going to create workforce shortages. It is potentially going to damage businesses in the state of Minnesota. Businesses can take care of their employees and provide what is needed. We're looking for meaningful adjustments to that paid family medical leave as we move forward. We've got a great team within our caucus working on that, and you will see those proposals rolling through as we move forward. We need changes to what is currently out there. Thank you.